we all have potential that isn't realized, but that we regard that potential, even though it's not realized, as real. You know, you can see a situation in your own life that's full of potential. You're often extremely excited when you encounter something that's full of potential, because what you see is something that could be, you see a future beckoning for you, that could be if only you interacted with it properly. And it activates your nervous system, right, in a very basic way. And we even understand how that happens. And everyone believes it, because what you act reflects what you believe. And you make judgments about yourself and others based on those beliefs. And they're deep judgments. So the idea that you believe that there is such a thing as human potential, I think it's undeniable. If you act at all, if you expect things of people at all, then you're demonstrating your commitment to the idea of potential. But then I wonder if there's something even deeper going on, because we are very materialistic, modern people. And there's great power in that, obviously. We've obtained great control over the material world, for better or for worse. But we do have a tendency to think of the world purely as a material structure. And it isn't really obvious to me that the world is exactly a material structure. It seems to be something more like constrained potential. You know, because everything is a certain way, but everything that is a certain way could be a multitude of other ways, and almost an infinite multitude of other ways. And the degree to which something that is could be a multitude of other ways is dependent on large part on how you interact with it, right? Even with materials that we're very familiar with, we continue to discover new properties and put them to use. It's like things are compacted into their material form, but that doesn't exhaust what they are, especially not in relationship to other things. And so it seems to me, even if you can't replace the materialist perspective with the perspective that it's better to construe the world, construe being as if it's made of possibility rather than the world as if it's made of matter, it's at least useful to have that as an additional viewpoint. Is that because you could say, well, the material philosophy is very useful as a tool for obtaining certain sorts of benefits, which it clearly is, but then this more metaphysical perspective, which I think is more accurate in some ways, that the world is a place of potential, is also an extraordinarily useful way to approach the world. And it is practically useful, you know. But we talked last week a little bit about doing something as simple as trying to organize a room. It's by no means obvious how much potential there is in a room, right? There's a very large amount of potential in any given room. Tremendous amount of potential, especially if it's connected with people. And maybe an inexhaustible amount of potential. And maybe there's an inexhaustible amount of potential everywhere, and that we just don't know how to get access to it. Well, that's certainly true. I mean, it's certainly true to some degree. We don't know how to get access to all the potential of our children, for example, or ourselves, or our loved ones, or the people that we know. So I think this story is trying to hammer that idea home too, which is, don't be so sure that it's impossible, or maybe don't let the assumption that it's impossible stop you from going forth into the world. That would be, and that's a, what would you say? That's like an inoculation against nihilism. And for a long time I understood nihilism very well. I could understand its rationale, associated with the tragedy of life, associated with suffering and evil, associated with the observation of finitude and the arbitrary and unjust nature of the world. But the more I've thought about it, the less I've come to believe that there's any excuse for it whatsoever. And I think the reason for that is that it forestalls effort. It forestalls the ability to discover for yourself. Maybe there's no reason to be so goddamn hopeless, except that it's easier to be useless. Now, and I'm not, believe me, I'm not making that case. I'm not saying that that's what's besetting people who are clinically depressed, for example. That's not my point. Clinical depression is a terrible thing. There's lots of reasons to be rendered, to be tossed into a catastrophic condition. That isn't what I mean. I mean that kind of cynical, arrogant, rational, hyper-intelligent nihilism that throws the world away as if it's of little use before it's been properly engaged with. Better to engage with it. and see what happens. And better to make the assumption that if the world isn't returning to you what it is that you need, then either you're not doing it right or you've conceptualized what you need badly. When you set the goal properly, get your culture behind you and move into the world, is that there's a biological transformation that occurs as a consequence of that, which means that a bunch of you that hasn't been turned on, turns on. And I guess one question would be is, what would you be like if you turned on everything inside of you that could be turned on? Well, that's a good goal. That's a good thing to find out. So